Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Bogren,
And I'm Rich Sampson.
and we are the team here at CTAA who puts together the Community Transportation Digital Magazine. And we're excited today to be talking to you about a new edition of the magazine focusing on the rural transit reality. And it's been a while since we've done an entire themed edition of CT focusing on rural transportation issues, and it's about time that we did another. So we're happy to be working on this right now.
Yeah, I guess the last time we did one, Scott, was in 2008.
2008. So yeah, that's way too long. What we try to do in this edition is provide a little bit more of kind of trend analysis and data analysis, demographic analysis, and then kind of show how those trends and data is playing out actually in some operations. So I'll cover some of what we found with this analysis, and I'll turn it over to Rich to talk about two major profiles that we have in this edition of the magazine. Really, what we tried to look at was mostly data from the United States, the census from 2010. And it tells us a lot about kind of the changing face of rural America. It tells us that the fastest growing parts of the rural population are in areas running right up to urban areas. It tells us that in large portions of rural America, population is declining. In fact, for the first time, the population decline is so much that we are seeing a major urbanizing trend in the country. Population decline, interestingly, is kind of inverse to the need we're finding for community and public transportation, that this hollowing out of the population where what's left behind are under the age of 18 or over the age of 65, that the younger, more mobile aspects of the society that are leaving to find better economic opportunities in urban areas are making the population decline, but increasing the need for transportation alternatives because the more immobile are left behind. So that really has been I think a really key facet. You'll see some other analyses that we looked at when it comes to the trends on who makes up the population now in rural areas. You'll see a large increase in the minority populations, particularly in the Spanish-speaking population, which is interesting. And of course, we looked at healthcare because we find that chronic conditions, obesity, diabetes, certainly dialysis and renal failure, they're more prevalent in rural areas. And so all of these aspects, how are they changing the face of what we've traditionally known as rural transit, and how has rural transit from its inception in the 1970s today? It's a different rural America that rural transit's serving today. And what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing regionalization. We're seeing much longer trips, and we're seeing more dispersed destinations, where the traditional mode of rural transit at its outset was serving seniors and taking them to congregate meal sites. If there was kind of the standard typical trip, that was probably it. That is not the standard typical trip today at all. And so part of what we're talking about here is how's that playing out in the actual services. And I'm going to turn it over to Rich now to talk about two of the big features he wrote, one in New Mexico and the other in the state of Michigan, that we see all these trends playing out.
Yeah, that's right, Scott. In a couple instances, both in Michigan with the Isabella County Transportation Commission and in New Mexico with the North Central Regional Transit District, we see these trends kind of playing out in real communities, in very different communities in two different parts of the country. The Isabella County Transportation Commission works with a number of key partners, whether it's Central Michigan University or the Saginaw Chippewa Tribe, to provide both kind of a small urban community service surrounded by a rural transit operation, and how those things blend together to provide and meet the mobility needs in the community. It's really kind of an interesting story. They've been around since the beginning of rural transit services in the mid 70s, but the entire time they've been coordinating and innovating to arrive at a place where the system today is just much different than it was in the mid 70s. Meanwhile, in north central New Mexico, kind of in and around Santa Fe, and then north up into Espanola and Taos, and kind of along the major corridors there's a new regional transportation system that offers 22 different routes throughout the area, but they're really long distance trips going from anywhere from the Los Alamos research installation in Los Alamos to casino locations, healthcare facilities, all very long trips across counties, towns, jurisdictions, where all those boundaries that mattered decades ago don't really help people get where they need to go. So in these two stories, you'll see very, in ways very different, but also similar approaches to providing and responding to the trends that we're seeing in rural America. And we've reached out to a lot of communities and states around the country to match up policies and legislation with those trends and the way that people are providing services. And you see that play out in our reauthorization recommendations that we included in this issue, Scott.
Yeah, in talking about trends, it's one thing to look at research data and demographic data, and that tells you one piece of this puzzle. But actually talking to rural transit providers is just as useful. And we've done a lot of that in the last year and a half as we've been working on our kind of a set of reauthorization recommendations for MAP 21 reauthorization, which we are now in the middle of. And we included in this edition of the magazine a complete set, including the rural page, but also small urban, operating, capital, planning, the complete set of recommendations that the association, through both its board, its state and tribal delegates, and then through these listening sessions that were held in 15 different states, it's really where all of these where these recommendations come from. We included that as well. We had the ability, our board chair, Barb Klein, from a rural operator in Prairie Hills Transit in Spearfish, South Dakota. Barb performed wonderfully before the Senate Banking Committee and testifying on behalf of all of our members. We included her testimony. And lastly, there's a capital crisis that has been brewing through MAP 21 and others, where we're seeing really a crisis emerging with rural and small urban systems being unable to get the equipment they need to maintain their services. And Rich has really done a lot of work on building that and telling that story. And one of the infographics that we developed for Congress, we also wanted to share with you, and that's also part of this edition. As well, at the end of the edition, you'll see there's some discussion of CTA-specific resources and programs that we hope you'll take advantage of, whether it's insurance and training and safety, that we're developing with the rural transit industry specifically in mind. So before we close, I just wanted to say that I've done a lot of issues on rural transit here, and we cover rural transit very regularly, even though this is a edition dedicated to that. And things have changed, but there are some things that haven't changed. And when you look at, Rich was bringing up responsiveness and flexibility and these kind of mantras that are not just words, but they're really how rural transit systems have built themselves and how they've become what they are today, which is a standard part of the National Rural Transit Network. Those things haven't changed at all. They're not going to change. And in fact, it's those skill sets that Rich and I are convinced the more we visit systems and the more we tell these stories, it's those long-held skill sets, those visions, the values, those will be what transitions all of our rural transit members, no matter what the demographics are, into where they're going to be in the future, and really are kind of the linchpin or the bedrock of what makes for good, cost-effective, efficient rural public transportation. We hope that comes across in this edition because we certainly like writing about it, and it's always impressive. So, Rich, we can both say thanks for taking a listen to this and watching this, and we hope you do very much enjoy this edition of Digital Community Transportation.